In fact, research shows that the reason why humans take longer to mature than other animals is because of the number of neurons in our cortex. The more neurons we have, the longer it takes to make you physiologically mature and mentally capable of being independent. And the same factor which seems to explain the differences in life expectancies. So the more neurons you have in the cortex, the longer it takes to become an adult and the longer you can expect to live. So maybe we humans are not that useless at the end. Now, I would like to share something of my own experience with you when it comes to growing up and becoming an adult. And for me, there was a tipping point when I felt I was crossing a line and stepping into adulthood. In fact, looking back into the mirror, I think it took a lot longer for me to become an adult, but at that time, I had this strong feeling that things were not going to be the same anymore, and there was clearly a before and an after. And that was when I got my driving license. As I said, everybody has their own experiences. And when I was preparing for this talk and mentioned this to a good friend of mine, she told me that she definitely couldn't relate to this because passing her driving license was one of the most frustrating, painful, and expensive experiences of her life. But hey, for me, it was different. So I didn't waste any time, and I started taking lessons as soon as legally possible at 16. And I passed the test on the day of my 18th birthday, the perfect birthday present. And what a great feeling. I was moving away from a world where I depended on my parents and public transportation to move around, to a world where I had the freedom to move around on my own, assuming, of course, that somebody would be kind enough to lend me a car. And I was thirsty for freedom and independence and road trips. And I wanted to feel responsible for my own destiny, and which I thought at that time was best achieved driving a car. But hey, I was just a child at the time and I didn't know much about life. How does it relate to AI and analytics, you're going to ask? Well, there is also a tipping point for organizations who are looking to use AI and analytics to change the game in the way they do business. A similar maturation that is happening over time and eventually lead to this analytical driving test and adulthood. We can identify different stages in this evolution. First, you're going to nursery and you're not doing much there. You're just learning to be, enjoying life in a state of blissed ignorance and pure happiness. Nothing wrong there, right? But you need to start somewhere. And then you move to the playground where you can play and have fun, interact with other kids, invent new games. What it means for your analytics is that you are exploring the potential of data, playing around with new technologies that are readily accessible, having fun with things like open source, uncovering what's possible to do with those technologies, and so on. And then comes the time of adolescence. You are full of energy, but you also have a lot of insecurities. You have a powerful desire to explore and change the world, but you're overwhelmed by the scope of possibilities and decisions to make. You want to be independent, but you don't have the means to realize your ambitions. For many, it's a difficult time, full of frustrations and doubts, spending a lot of time searching in your soul what you really, really, really want to do with your life. And unfortunately, many organizations are still at that analytical stage today. In addition of missing a recipe to do stuff, organizations are also facing the challenge to have too many choices to make in an analytical landscape that is overcrowded. New technologies are coming up every day. And it's up to you to figure out what is relevant to you and how to make all those pieces work together to actually deliver something to your business. But then comes the time of going to university. And this is where you can do some proper learning and experimentation. It's time for trying things out, a time for failing, and a time for starting all over again, a time for dead ends, and a time for new starts. But it's an exciting time. Experimentation is a very important stage of your journey with analytics. So you want to let this creativity of your data science team to try new things and the innovation lab and educate the business about what can be achieved with analytics, what works for your organization, prioritizing use cases, and developing a business case. I have a word of caution though. Although I think experimentation is great, you don't want to let experimentation drive your strategy. The choices made in the innovation lab are not necessarily the best when it comes to scaling things at the enterprise level and delivering tangible results to your business. But finally, here you are. You made it. You're now a grown-up, responsible adult. You got a job, you're making some money, and you do your best to realize your full potentials using your skills and experience you have acquired as you were growing up. So let's leave our growing up analogy for now and consider AI for grown-ups. What does it look like? There are a few characteristics of a mature AI practice: fast and reliable, effortless, governed, and impactful. Starting with fast and reliable, the question is, how quickly can you develop and deploy analytical models? How long will it take from the time a business problem or business opportunity is identified and the time when a new model is fully deployed in a production system to address this challenge or this opportunity? With fast-moving market conditions and the kind of uncertainty that we have seen with the COVID-19 crisis, it is clear that you cannot afford to wait to adapt the way you make business decisions with analytics. For instance, when you have to change your demand forecasting system and supply chain based on shifting demand in the market, or when you need to predict when and where the next pandemic outbreak is going to strike, or when you need to work out your financial exposure to an economic crisis. The speed of your analytics development and deployment is critical to the resilience of your organization in a time of uncertainties. So you need a speed, but you also need this to be effortless. Scaling the use of analytics is essential, for example, to be able to micro-segment your customers and be able to prevent customers going to the competition, or to maximize customer lifetime value by offering them the services and products that they are the more likely to buy from you. But to do this, you cannot afford to hire an army of expensive data scientists. And even if you could, how do you ensure that they remain productive? Because developing and deploying analytics is a collaborative effort between business analysts, data scientists, developers, and IT operations. So the only way you can do more with less is by streamlining the process through automation and effective collaboration between the different parties involved. This is true not only when you deploy a new model into production, but also during the continuous monitoring of models in production to ensure that they keep performing at their best and that they are retrained or replaced in a timely fashion when the performance decay. Governance is another key ingredient of a mature AI practice. Governance will provide a number of things. It will provide transparency of what models are in production, how well they perform, what models are in the pipe, and where bottlenecks are, and to prioritize your development and deployment efforts. Governance will provide traceability of what decisions are made using what models and what data and with what results. Governance will provide also explainability and fairness, so you can provide insight on why specific recommendations are made by the AI and on what ground a specific decision was made to monitor and correct the bias. This is important to comply with ethical and compliance requirements. All those characteristics are important, but maybe the most important of those is that your analytics and AI projects should actually deliver some results to your business. Just consider that the best neural network model in the world, sitting on the shelf or stuck somewhere in the deployment process, is less valuable than the simplest regression model in production. And then you need a way to measure the performance of your models. not only from an accuracy point of view, but also in terms of business outcomes. And this is critical to justify your analytics investment and prioritize your project. In reality, many organizations are failing to operationalize their analytics and to realize the value from their analytics investments. In fact, Gartner estimates that 60% of analytical models ever developed are never deployed in production. Both McKinsey and Forbes recognize that the main obstacle is not necessarily the performing of analytics per se, rather it's the inability to deploy analytics into a business context. And Bain estimates that 70% of organizations consider advanced analytics as a critical strategic priority, but only 10% consider themselves successful with it. So why is that? Why is it so difficult? Because there is too much focus on model development and data science, and not enough on everything around that you need to deliver value. Developing machine learning systems is relatively fast and cheap, but maintaining them over time is difficult and expensive. This is what Google called the hidden technical debt of machine learning systems. So how do you fix it? Let me introduce you to ModelOps. In its simpler definition, ModelOps is how you activate AI, how you operationalize analytical models, and how you realize the value from data science. ModelOps is the practice that allows organizations to efficiently deploy analytical models into business operations to drive analytical-driven decisions. This is achieved through a governance framework and formal automated deployment and monitoring processes. In other words, what ModelOps does is to industrialize your analytics. On one side, you have the handcrafted approach, nothing wrong there, and the result might be a unique, beautiful piece of engineering. But it takes a long time to build. It's very expensive, very exclusive, and it doesn't scale. This is the equivalent of building your analytics infrastructure from scratch. You can produce something nice, but it will take a long time and it will not scale. On the other side, you have an analytics factory where the production of analytical models is fully industrialized. Processes are automated and controlled. The result is predictable, reliable, and affordable. With this approach, you can build and deploy an analytical models in a matter of hours rather than months, and you produce hundreds of them rather than just a few. So what does it take to build a factory like this for your analytics? You will have to consider three components for your ModelOps framework. First, people and culture, establishing clear roles and responsibilities and effective collaboration between the business, the data science teams, the application developers, and the IT operations, but also fostering a culture of innovation where people are allowed to fail, but to fail fast and to try often. Second, you need to consider processes and organization, developing formal, repeatable, and automated processes using agile methodology to develop, deploy, and monitor analytical models. And finally, the technology, providing key capabilities around the centralized management and governance of models, the orchestration of workflows, the automation of pipeline deployment through CI/CD tools, and cloud-native deployment methods using containers. There are multiple ways you could approach ModelOps, and you should look to design a framework that works for you. There are various levels of sophistication that you can use to implement ModelOps, ranging from a relatively simple and non-intrusive approach to a fully automated factory. You should therefore design something that is appropriate for your organization, readiness, and business needs. There are a number of factors that you should consider when you design your approach. How badly do you need to scale first? How quickly do you need to be able to deploy new models? How many models are you planning to develop and to support your business needs? Secondly, you need to consider your governance requirements. You might have some requirements to comply with internal or external regulations. Thirdly, you should consider your organization readiness to implement agile and DevOps methodologies, and whether or not there is an executive drive to break silos and implement enterprise-wide analytics. And finally, you should consider the cost of implementing those changes in your organization. So those different considerations will drive how sophisticated and elaborated your ModelOps framework should be. But independently of the level of sophistication that you will need, there are a number of things you can do now to start your journey with ModelOps. And I'd like to offer a few tactics that we've seen working with many organizations across the world. There are many tips that I could offer, but I chose to mention just 5 of them because I think they are the most important and the most effective. My first recommendation is to create what I call a center of gravity for your analytics. Sometimes we call it analytics center of excellence or analytics shared service system. But whatever you call it, you need a specific entity responsible to proactively drive the use of analytics across your organization, align with corporate priorities, promote new use cases and best practices, and facilitate cross-functional collaboration and the reuse of analytical assets. Although this entity can sometimes take on analytical work on behalf of certain lines of business who are lacking the necessary capabilities, its primary role is to enable and facilitate analytical work, which is done by other analytics teams in various departments, and to provide guidance on the best tools to use for the job. For example, by providing a data science workbench where analytic teams can access the tools that they like and the tools that they need, but in a controlled and governed environment. My second recommendation is to centralize the management and the governance of all your models, regardless of what technologies have been used to create them. This is critical to provide capabilities such as transparency and lineage. Being able to monitor what models are in production, who is responsible for them, and how they're performing, so that you can take action when needed. Being able to establish explainability and fairness of decisions being made with those models. The central management of all models also enables the necessary collaboration between data scientists and IT operations when deploying and maintaining models in production. The third recommendation is to develop self-service capabilities that can empower a vast base of users beyond the data scientist community to access and analyze data without having to use programming languages. This is a key aspect of scaling analytics and developing a culture of data literacy and self-sufficiency, bringing analytical insight into more business areas and decision-making. Because data science talents are rare and generally very focused on the technologies they like, you need to embrace the diversity of their skills and to enable them to use their energy and creativity with the programming languages they like, but making sure that they don't reinvent the wheel every time, working alongside other teams in a governed environment. And finally, my advice is to make the most of what cloud computing has to offer in terms of flexibility and scalability. Moving analytics workload to the cloud is definitely something that you should consider, although you'll have to pay attention to things like data gravity and the additional technical debt that you might accumulate if you don't think through your cloud strategy carefully. You will need to be able to easily deploy analytics where the data is across multiple cloud platforms, as well as on-premise environments. Build once, deploy everywhere. So as a practical next step to get started with ModelOps, there is one simple thing that I would strongly encourage you to do, which is to take a 5-minute assessment to evaluate your own readiness for ModelOps and identify areas where you might want to focus your attention. So you can follow the link on the screen here or to scan the QR code. It takes only 5 minutes and you will receive immediately a personalized report highlighting key gaps and some recommendations for you to consider. Now, let's listen from an organization who is actually doing this, implementing ModelOps to scale analytics and accelerate digital transformation. Bonolo, thanks again for joining us today. You are the product owner of the ModelOps project at Nedbank. So can you tell us a little bit more about this project, what it's about, and what you have achieved so far?
Once again, Olivier, thank you very much for having me. The project that you're referring to is the digitalization of risk models within Nedbank. What this looks to do is to find ways of us to decrease the time that it takes for quantitative analysts and data scientists from development, QA to production. What we realize is that our current model lifecycle was very complicated. It took too long and it basically stifled our innovation. We had good ideas, we had great data scientists and quantitative analysts, but they couldn't necessarily realize those ideas quick enough. What the project looks to do is to utilize ModelOps, as you've stated in your presentation, and find ways within that ModelOps lifecycle to make things come to life much quicker. So for us, we looked at how we can take the ModelOps lifecycle, customize it to our need and our approach, and try to find ways where any quant or data scientist within the bank can develop something and realize it much quicker so that our clients, whether it be internal stakeholders or external stakeholders, can realize the benefits of our models much quicker. So that's the gist of the entire project. What we've done so far and what we've learned is it isn't necessarily as easy as you'd like it to be. As you've stated, people can take a 5-minute assessment to see whether they are ready for ModelOps to be implemented within their area, but it is something that's going to need very specialized thinking. You're going to take a good long approach and look at yourself before you decide how you're going to do it. So that's something that we've realized and learned during the journey from our side.
Absolutely, and you are so right. You know, the self-assessment tool that I suggested people to follow, you know, it takes 5 minutes, and it's a good starting point to get the thinking and the conversation going. However, as I said also in my presentation, you have to design it, right? And there are different ways you can design it, and different levels of automation and levels of sophistication. So it's important to take that time to really think hard on what do we actually need, because you don't want to design a Ferrari if you don't need it, right? It will cost a lot of money and a lot of effort and not necessarily provide the actual business benefits you're expecting. So you're absolutely right. And yeah. So this ModelOps project at Nedbank, is it something that is focused on on your specific areas of risk and financial crime, or is it something that you're looking to deploy at the group level? So is it, you know, what is rollout strategy? Are you starting somewhere and then planning to deploy everywhere, or it's been designed as a group-wide practice from the start?
That's a very good question. I wish I had my executive here with me today because he would be able to explain how he thought about this. But from how we've seen it and how he's done it is that we are looking at a localized treatment. So our problem area is our area for now, but we're also looking at a global approach. So we can't think only for our team and only for our space without thinking for the entire group as well, because that would lead to waste. As you said, we need to build something that's scalable, that will allow for more teams within the bank to realize the benefit of ModelOps. And this is going to be a group-wide practice. We don't want it to just be us within the financial crime and risk space. We want it to be that any quantitative analyst or data scientist within the bank can utilize what we've learned and what we've built to realize the benefits of this. So in short, based on the vision that we've underpinned this project on, it's going to look to accommodate all of the quantitative analysts and data scientists within the bank, whether they do this in the next 6 months, in the next year, or in the next 10 years. Ultimately, we want to make sure that anybody can come and realize their ideas in a much quicker fashion by adopting this methodology across the Nedbank group.
So start small, but think big, right? I guess that's the, yeah.
100%. We have to make sure that we make the right decisions for us. And it's very hard for you to make the right decisions for everyone at the same time. What we need to do is focus on what we need to get right on our side, make sure that it works, trial it, test it. And once we've gone through the growing pains, at least we would have went through the growing pains, and so that everyone else can come on and realize that benefit of our growing pains, because at the end of the day, it's us as a group. It's Nedbank group. It's not just one specific sub team in Nedbank. We are thinking for the entire organization, and we hope that the entire organization will benefit from this. Well, that is our plan.
Well, it sounds like you're on the front line of innovation in across the bank. That's an interesting place to be. Talking about scaling of analytics, can you give us an indication of what was your requirement or future requirements about how many models you want to be able to use in production or looking to have in the future, and how much faster do you need to be able to deploy those new models? Do you have any metrics along the lines of your scalability requirements?
So with regards to how many models we want to see in production, the easy answer to that is as many as possible, as long as the benefit is realized and justifiable. That's what we are focusing on from our side. At the current state where we are, our team does have a few models in production. We are a team that is running a big portfolio within the risk analytical space. So we do need to have projects within production. But what we're trying to do now is to say, for the new C-suite risks that are coming into the picture, even the existing, what we would deem the traditional risk, how can we make sure that the model lifecycle from development to quality assurance to development to production, is much quicker? And we want to make sure that if something can be realized from a business case perspective and you can quantify the benefit, whether it's cost saving, whether it be money generating, whether it be operational efficiency, that can be put into production. You said it yourself, Gartner did it in the study that you mentioned, that 70% of models developed are not seeing production, and that is waste. It's waste for quantitative analysts and data scientists to come to work every day, develop something, and see it not actually realize the benefit that it's meant to realize. And it leads to a whole lot of problems, such as people feeling very despondent about their work because they don't feel as though it's going to add the benefit that they wanted to add, because we're in the business of making the lives of our clients much easier and simpler. And if we can't productionize our models, then we can't necessarily do that. So we want as many models to be productionalized as possible, so long as the benefit can be justified, the benefit can be realized in our space.
Right. It sounds like it's not just about scaling and analytics, then it's also about basically stopping wasting efforts and time and money in developing things that are not being used. So it's really about realizing the benefits of the work that is already being done, right? And making sure it's actually being used in the front line of business operations.
Correct. And like you said, Olivier, that we can have neural networks, but the one that is in production means more than the sophisticated neural network that isn't in production. And we want to make sure that that neural network can be productionalized, or if the best model is the regression model, then let that regression model be productionalized. That's what matters at the end of the day. Do people come to work, develop what they develop with the expertise that they have, and does it make a difference in our internal and external stakeholders' lives?
Yeah. I see quite often, maybe too often, this common mistake of analytics team spending literally months and years trying to productionalize something that is very elaborated, and it's their baby. They spend a lot of time developing something that is very sophisticated and very elegant from an algorithmic perspective. But they spend too much time and effort trying to make this work in a production environment, and as a result, they don't get any value from this work. So I think it's sometimes more important to focus on getting something in production rather than trying to get something great in production, right? It's the Ferrari versus the commodity kind of debate. In your case, Bonolo, so you've started this project a while ago already, and I know it's an ongoing project and ongoing development effort. But was there a specific business trigger for this project? Was there a compelling event that made the case for it? How did you make the case for it, and how did you justify the investment of establishing this ModelOps framework?
So I'm part of a team that's under our group risk function, which is the group risk analytical function. And within this group risk analytical function, we are relatively new within the age of a team. I'd say if you're looking at from AI to grown-ups, as you said, we are still very much within our adolescence of our team because we've only been around for close to 2 years. In this, there have been a lot of use cases that have come to us where the business benefit is so large and so beneficial for us to look at, but we couldn't necessarily develop and productionalize the project as quickly as we wanted to. After much discussion between our leadership, being Tibosiso Makakula and Tony Johnson, what they then realized is we need to find a way, in an accelerated way, for us to make sure that we can actually realize the benefits of these use cases. And when this use case came about, we struggled for a few months. We hit our heads against the wall. We got a bit frustrated. And the decision was, well, let's try and flip everything around on its head. Let's see how we can not only meet the governance gates that are there, but also make sure that the client can get what they need much quicker. And it was that formed the catalyst for us to look at not only that individual use case, but all the multiple use cases that have been coming in and out of our area, but also the use cases across the business units. As you know, executives speak, executives will say that we need this, we need that. And this was the opportunity for us to collaborate across teams to see how we can make sure that not only our space can meet that business case need, but any other team can. And that one use case has led to us looking at multiple use cases of how we can move them from what we currently have in a production state to more of a hybrid on-prem to cloud kind of production state.
You're talking about success, and you mentioned before that your goal is to be able to deploy as many models in production as possible. But have you defined any specific KPIs from a business perspective? How are you going to measure the success for this initiative? And have you estimated the benefits that you're hoping to deliver from a TCO or operational efficiency perspective?
So each use case is different. Each use case will come with its own benefit. And what we are trying to instill from a culture perspective is making sure that the client understands the use case as much as we understand the use case, and also making sure that we understand the benefit that we're going to bring to the client. The first and easy metric that we want to look at and that we've put to ourselves is, well, how long does it take for someone to develop something to it landing in production? We want to make sure that the time it takes from development to production is at least 1/3 of what it was prior. That's a goal that we've set for ourselves. Whether we meet it or not will be seen in future cases, but that's something that we are very ambitious about because we think it is very possible. So it's the efficiency of our quants and data scientists or anyone who works in the analytical space. How long does it take for them to come up with something and put it into production? If we can halve that, or even give them 1/3 of their time back to work on other use cases, then it's a trickle down knock-on effect, because not only do business units have more resources to look at more use cases, but also the quant has time to experiment more, they are much more confident to experiment and try different methodologies because they know that things will end up in the production state if it's done correctly. So that is one of our simple KPIs that we're looking at. But then, like you mentioned, from an operational efficiency perspective and even a cost of operation, that is something that's very, very important, because if we can create models that can decrease cost, that can make sure that things are being optimized, then ultimately business units spend less, therefore the bank and the group-wide organization benefits, which ends up landing to our final and most important person, the client. So we are looking at it from a cost perspective, but also a time perspective. Time is cost in our space.
Yeah, that makes sense. I think we're going to run a little bit out of time, and we want to let some the opportunity for people in the attendance to ask questions. I have a last question for you, Bonolo. What was the biggest headache or challenge that you have encountered so far, and how did you address it?
There've been many. There've been many. Ultimately, I think the biggest thing is that you need a lot of people involved in this project. You need a lot of expertise coming in, and you need to make sure that everyone is aligned on the vision. There will be pushback because you are coming with different ways that are different to what has already been there. And what has already been there has succeeded in some cases. So there'll always be that, why do we want to change certain things? So our biggest headache was basically creating that simple alignment across all stakeholders. Are we aligned to deliver this goal, to meet this vision? Because ultimately, if we are, then we can do things much quicker and much better. But let's not forget that change management is something that's always going to be a part of this process. I hope people do not underestimate the importance of that. Take people along for the journey and not just thrust everything upon them and say, yes, we have come to change everything. That was our biggest headache, of finding an effective way of instilling this change management process. And at the end of the day, we are still learning. We are still trying to find effective ways to convince people that this is the way to go. Hopefully, with the success that we will realize, we hope that this is going to be one of those things that will put the people that were sitting on the fence over to our side. And I think that everyone's going to go through that. Everyone will go through that change management process. But ultimately, if you have enough people who believe in the vision, then things will be much easier.
Yeah, so it's definitely not just about the technology, right? It's about taking people on board and making them understand the importance of working together for the greater good.
Correct.
I'd like to, we just have a few minutes left. I'd like to check with the audience if there are any questions from anybody. Otherwise, I might have another question for you, but I want to check with the audience first. Mersin, do we have any questions?
If you have questions, guys, you can raise hand and we can then unmute you to start with a question. We have still 2 minutes. No question, not in the chat as well. Okay, you can go ahead with the last point, Olivier.
So last question for you, Bonolo, on my side. You know, looking forward into the future. In an ideal scenario, I know everything is still ongoing and you're still learning as you progress into this project. But can you describe your vision? What you would like analytics to look like at Nedbank in, let's say, 5 years' time?
You mentioned it in your presentation, but this has become an acronym that I hope to see within the Nedbank space, and I think we are going to see within the next 5 years. And that is, analytics will become fast. What do I mean by fast? Well, F for future ready and future proof, A for accelerated, S for sustainable and scalable, and T for trustworthy. All of these things come together to deliver analytics that can be governed, analytics that can develop and deliver benefit. So we want analytics to be fast. We want our clients to realize the benefit much quicker. We want to make sure that the languages and the methodologies that we are using are future-proof and future-ready, because we do not know what the scientists in the world, from MIT, from Stanford, from Wits University, these universities are developing new methodologies and new methods are coming across, and the open source community is growing at an accelerated rate. So we need to make sure that we are future ready and future proof. We want to make sure that our model lifecycle is much more accelerated, and we want to make sure that it's scalable and sustainable. We don't want to put things that aren't necessarily going to be important and stifle our growth. But most importantly, working in the environment that we work in, Olivier, we want to make sure that everything is trustworthy. We want to make sure that everything is governed. We want to make sure that our clients can trust our results. And that is where I see the future of analytics within the next 5 years. It will be fast.
Thank you, Bonolo, again. It was very inspiring, and I hope it gave a lot of matter for thoughts to the group here. So thank you for being with us again. Mohsin, thank you for invitation, for having us.